Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem amma ba'd. Uh, Today we are going to continue the second pillar of contract. So before I go into that, let me just remind you there are three pillars of contract. So the first one was the expression. So we discussed a lot about expression. We told you that it is a sigha. It is called offer and acceptance. So we discussed mostly the condition of expressions. Before that, we talked about the what is actually offering and accepting, who can become the offerer, who can become the acceptor. We discussed the differences between the imams. There is a imam who can say the pillars of contract is only two, which is offer and acceptance. Okay, are we good? Yeah. So we discussed the condition of expression, the clarity, the conformity, and the continuity. So after that, we are actually going now into the second pillar of a contract, which is actually you and me, right? The buyer and seller. The first one is the intention of the buyer and seller, the way of expression, how do they express, how do they deliver the indicator that they want to do business, they want to do they want to do the um, transaction. Now it is up to the buyer and seller. Is it possible that anyone can buy, anyone can sell? So this is what we are going to see, the person who involved in this. It is important because according to Islamic transaction, you need to know the capacity of the person, the one who involved in doing the contract. Unlike secular transaction, Islamic transaction is different, and it particularly when it comes to um, purchasing or selling or buying from someone who is not qualified to become the buyer and seller, it is actually the transaction will be void, it will be invalid. I cannot say that there was a person who offered his iPhone for 10 ringgit and then he offered it. I asked him, are you sure for 10 ringgit? Then I bought it for 10 ringgit. No, no one can buy, no one can sell, no one is ready to sell his iPhone for 10 ringgit unless he is insane, unless he is the person who lost his mind, unless he is the person who is not mature, or maybe the person is sleeping, or maybe he is in the different world. No one is ready to sell his iPhone for 10 ringgit. So these are the thing we need to learn today. What kind of people actually? What are the condition for the people that? Because as I told you, everything goes back to the principle of transaction, which is mutual consent. It has to be mutually taradi. We discussed it in two classes ago. You need to make sure that you are selling something, you are buying something on the mutual consent. Because mutual consent means mutually is helping each other, mutually is beneficial to each other. I buy something from you because I like what you have and you like what I have, and somehow I can manage to use what you have At the same time, you actually can utilize what I have. So we had a deal, something that we can exchange, mutual exchange based on mutual consent. So remember these two words is quite important for this subject. Mutual exchange based on mutual consent. So equally there should be the consent, there should be benefit. Otherwise the transaction is not going to be valid. It will become batil. I think this is what actually makes Islamic economics different from other economics, because just for the sake of business, just for the sake of material wealth, material life, we don't want to spoil anybody's life. We are not allowed to do that kind of thing. Even though I purchased something and then I came home, I saw something else in my bag which is more than what I sent, more than what I spent. To me, I have to go back and return the things to the seller. I cannot say that it is a seller's mistake, so I can keep it as a kind of gift. No. If you already know the thing that you are receiving it, which is actually the wrong stuff, sometimes it happens. It is a wrong thing, and you are taking it, and you are actually it is mistakenly coming to your place. You must acknowledge that, you go back and discuss and clarify with the seller, is it the right thing that you are giving. You have to do in the same manner, that if in case the seller gave you something lower than your price, what you will do, you always go back and say, and you sometimes you go back and you fight with him. You say, how come, how dare you give me the wrong thing, which is actually lower than the my price, isn't it? So the same manner that we should also show to the person who has given you the something which is higher than your price. So this is what we call mutual exchange based on mutual consent. Yeah. So today we are going to talk about those two people. Who are they? What are their qualification in order to make a transaction valid? Because the reason why we need to know all this, because according to according to Sharia, doing transaction is also part of ibadah. Uh, I told you several times, do not think you are actually doing ibadah only inside the surah, inside the masjid, because we barely spend only around 8 to 10 minutes, and altogether 5 times prayer. If we are praying properly, we are going to spend only 50 minutes or less than that, maybe 40 or 30 minutes. That is what we are actually spending our ibadah inside the masjid, or on top of the sajjada. We are now praying home, isn't it? We are not going to surah. Hopefully we go soon. So what I'm trying to tell, that is not only the ibadah that we have to count in. It has to be every single thing that we are doing, every single transaction that we are making, every single help that we are throwing out, every single concern that we are showing, including in our social media, in any other form of the telecommunication. Every single thing is counted. At the end of the day, every single action is going to be accountable. You are accountable for every single action that you are doing. That is the reason why we say Malik Yawmiddin. Every time we mention this Quranic verse in Surah Al-Fatiha, Maliku Yawmiddin, because the day of accountability. We are accountable, we are responsible for every single thing that we are doing. In that manner, we need to learn. That the reason why we are learning all this, it's quite important to make sure that we are using our dunya to get our akhirah. uh, that is the most important part. Make sure that anything that you are doing, make sure that anything that you are concerning to do, to make sure anything that you are doing in the dunya, make sure that that is actually helping your akhirah. Right. Dar al Akhirah. You have to make sure that you are finding it properly. So this dunya, it's not something that we have to blame. It's something that we have to praise, so that every single concerns, every single affairs that we are doing, it has to help us in Akhirah, so that we can get benefits in Akhirah, because our life is not something like meaningless. Because according to secular life, this life of this earth is meaningless. You just enjoy this life whatever the manner it is, because there is no second life for them. That's what they think. No, we don't think that. We believe in Akhirah. That's why وَهُمْ بِالْآخِرَةِ يُوقِنُونَ. We believe in Akhirah. Whatever the thing, the transaction we are doing, it has something to do in Akhirah. That's why we are learning all this kind of detailed transaction, Sharia, fiqh al-muamalat and everything. Yeah. Okay, so today we are just going to talk about this passive or receptive capacity. In Arabic, it's called ahliya al-wujub. Then it is called, the other one is active legal capacity, ahliya al-ada. All right, I will inshallah I will make it very simple for you to make you understand. Then if time allows, then we will go and talk about obstacles to capacity or restraints. What does it mean? Even though you are active legal capacity, what are the hurdles? What are the impediments or obstacles that you're gonna have? Even though you are active legal capacity, but there are some consequences. You are not supposed to do business. You are not supposed to do transaction. Those are the things will come under obstacles. There are around more than 8 or 9 obstacles we will discuss later. After that, it's about authorization. Let's say you are passive legal capacity, or maybe you are a person who did not become completely active, but you can, what you can do, or maybe sometimes you are active, you are complete, still you can authorize someone on your behalf. Let's say guardianship for those are minors, they may have the guardians, right? They will have the guardians. Then if you are a major, you are a baligh, then still you can ask some agent to work for you. He can do on your behalf. It's called agency al-wakala, right? So these are the things inshallah we are actually going to learn today. um, Hopefully this is all. Most importantly, you need to learn, you need to know all these things comes under the parties to a contract. So whatever I told you, look at the skeleton of the course outline, I mean the class outline. Look at the content, try to understand the content before you go into the slides. So we are still talking about the second pillar. All these things that I'm going to discuss going to come under second pillar, the parties to a contract. Then we will move to the third pillar. The third pillar is the subject matter. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is the parties to a contract. The contracting parties are the parties who exercise the sigha of ijab and qabul, right? As I told you, in order to conclude a valid contract, the contracting parties must have legal capacity. So what is actually capacity? It is called in Arabic ahliya. The capacity is the eligibility of a person to establish a right for an obligation upon himself. So you need to learn here two things before we go into ahliya, right? Whether you want to talk about ahliya al-wujub or ahliya al-ada, remember there are two things you need to learn before that. One is establishing the right. The other one is establishing the obligation, right? You may say receiving the right and making an obligation. For example, receiving the right mean, let's say for example, you have the right to receive your parents property. after they pass away, right? So this is called inheritance. This is like a rights that you have on their property, because after they die, it's gonna come to you. Then what about the obligation? So usually the rights mean something that you receive, and then the obligation is something that you give, you do. For example, you have the property and you have to pay the zakat. It comes under obligation, right? And you happen to destroy somebody's property, so you have the obligation to pay back, right? And you have your own car, which is your property, but you made an accident, or maybe you mistakenly or you knowingly, unknowingly, you destroy somebody's property with your property. Then you have to pay the compensation, ransom. So these are the things comes under obligation. You have a person that you ask him to work for you, then you have to pay the salary. It's obligation, right? You have the property, for example, you have the house and you need to do the maintenance. It's obligation. So there are rights which you receive and obligation which you give. All right, if you don't understand this, it will be difficult for you to understand the rest of the thing. So remember these two things all the time. Yeah. So now ahliya al wujub, ahliya al ada is two different things, because one is, the first one is something that only can receive the rights. The first one is something that can receive the rights, not necessarily it has to pay or do the obligation. The second part, ahliya al-ada, which is we call active capacity, is something that you also receive the rights, also you have to pay the obligation. You have to do the obligation. All right, so keep that in mind. We will discuss later, because there is complete and incomplete in each and every category. A person may not have the requisite legal capacity to conclude a transaction, but he may still receive rights and obligation. A child or lunatic person, for instance, cannot conclude a contract, but are entitled to receive their share of inheritance and are obliged to pay for the necessities bought for them through their guardian. So don't worry about this sentence, what I read you just now, because I'm going to give you a very good explanation after this. So moving to the next one. Here, as I told you, there are two kind of al-ahliya. One is al-wujub, the other one is al-ada, right? We talk about al-wujub first. Al-wujub is actually, it refers to the capacity of a person to receive rights and obligation. And the other one is, there is also complete and incomplete, right? Okay, so now you need to understand now, as I told you, ahliya is two types of ahliya. Number one is ahliya al-wujub. The second one is ahliya al-ada. But each ahliya has two categories. One is complete, the other one is incomplete. So with that, I can give you, like, you have four different categories, like incomplete ahliya al-wujub, then you have complete ahliya al-wujub. Then you have incomplete ahliya al-ada. Then you have complete ahliya al-ada. The reason I'm giving you this, if I give you an example to understand this, it will be very, very easy for you. Let me start like a human life. Yeah. The human life starts from fetus, right? It comes in the womb of your mother. It's like a alaqa, right? Alaqa in Arabic is like a fetus in your stomach, in your mother's stomach womb. So starting from the fetus, then you move to child. I mean, after it was born, then you move to a matured child, then you move to mature. So now you can see four different types of your life. The first one is when you are in fetus, when you are in the form of fetus, it is the example of incomplete ahliya al-wujub. I will let you know the explanation later. This is just to make you understand clearly. Fetus is the example of incomplete ahliya al-wujub. Then you have child, which is minor. Child is the example of complete ahliya al-wujub, right? Complete ahliya al-wujub. Then you have incomplete ahliya al-ada, which is the next category. I'm going to the ahliya al-ada, which is active legal capacity. So according to majority of the scholars, there is one terminology called distinguished child. What I mean by distinguished child, we may call him teenager. Because when someone is a teenager, like for example 12 years old, yeah, maybe 13, 14, for example teenage start from 13, not 12, sorry, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, right? So maybe if you are 13, you are still not a baligh, am I right? You are not baligh, right? Okay, you are not baligh if you are when you are 13, for example. Because according to fuqaha, there are many opinions. Someone says 17, someone say 18. All right. Is there anybody less than 18 in this classroom? I don't think so. Okay. So like 17, 18, 16, there are many opinions are there. But definitely 13 is not going to become the major. I mean, it's not mature. So now we call him as-sabi al-mumayyiz, which means distinguished teenager. So this distinguished teenager, he can do, he can actually, he is capable of doing few things. That's why he comes under incomplete ahliya al-ada, right? For example, he will be coming under this ahliya al-ada, right? But it comes under incomplete. For example, you have complete, incomplete, right? See that? He comes under incomplete active capacity. A child between the age of 8 and the age of puberty. Before he become baligh, if he is from 8 until he becomes a baligh, he is actually the example for incomplete ahliya al-ada. Then you have complete ahliya al-ada, which is actually complete active capacity, which is actually you and me, everybody, right? Complete active capacity. Okay, the reason I'm making it simple for you because I want you to remember these examples so that you are not going away from this class. So what is the example once again? Starting from fetus, the next one is child, the next one is as-sabi al-mumayyiz from 8 years old until become baligh, until become mature, until become major. Then the last one is from major until he die, from becoming baligh until he pass away. So these are the four different how do I call it, four different season of your life not season actually, four different stages of your life. All right. Okay. Now let's start with incomplete ahliya al-wujub. As I already give you the example is fetus, because fetus is the part of mother as it doesn't have any independent personality. But remember this: a fetus has the right to be attributed to his parents. For example, if the fetus is there in your mother's, if somebody's womb has a fetus and the father passed away, will the fetus get the inheritance? Yes, the fetus will get the inheritance even though it is inside. But the condition is it has to come outside. I mean, after 10 months, of course. Ironically, of course, eventually it will come one day. It will come, and after 7 months or 6 months, it will come out. Then it will hold the property of the death father, the deceased father. And then the receive the fetus also will get will wasiyah. For example, a grandfather is about to die, and he call his daughter and say, whatever in your fetus, whatever in your stomach womb, yeah, I'm going to give this property on his name, right? He can do that, but the condition is only he can do one third. The two-third should be going according to the Sharia. Only one third is accepted for wasiyah. Then if someone is waqf, someone is doing waqf also can be done according upon the name of wasiyah. Sorry, upon the name of fetus. By the way, there is no name fetus. The fetus, just a fetus only. There is no name for it, right? So, but the condition is it should born alive. If it born death, then those things are not valid. Yeah. Then you have complete receptive capacity. As I told you, a person uh, who after his birth until his death, like children, these children will become the example of complete receptive capacity. Now I'm coming and telling you once again, going back here, fetus, remember these all this example of incomplete ahliya al-wujub, this example only can receive the rights. It will not pay the rights. I mean, it will, there is no obligation for that right. For example, fetus has nothing to do with establishing the obligation. It will only receive the right. Now look at it. Here the example for complete receptive capacity is actually children with guardians. They receive rights and obligation as the guardians are acting on their behalf. For example, they cannot do the obligation, but the guardian must do. For example, if there is a yatim, when he was born, there is no father, the uncle or the grandfather will become the guardian of the child, isn't it? So now the child, the guardian will do, if the child has a plenty of property, the guardian will maintain the property. And if there is any business that they have to do, the guardian will do on behalf of the child. They can enter into the contracts of sale or gift through their guardians. They are also under obligation to pay zakat. This is something different. They are child, but as I told you, they are there to receive the rights, also to pay the obligation. But fetus, they don't have to pay the obligation. So remember the two things: receiving rights, paying the obligation. Now, according to the majority scholars, even though the children is less than baligh, I mean he is not even baligh, still he has to pay zakat and zakat al-fitr. This is the majority scholars are saying. But according to Abu Hanifa, he is not with it. He say you don't. The child has nothing to do because the child is not baligh. This salat, siyam, zakat. I mean this prayer, fasting, this paying zakat is all only obliged to the major, obliged to baligh. For that reason, Hanafi considers zakat as a form of worship. That's why child is not obliged. Hmm? At the same time, child also will not include in criminal liabilities. For example, a child is mistakenly killed someone, is a mistakenly, because child cannot kill someone. If it mistakenly killed someone, there is no punishment for the child. There will be many facilities that they put juvenile. There's a juvenile facilities, and they will put it there until the child getting the education, proper education, then it will come out. But it is not like a jail, like a punishment like adult. Yeah, a child who has obtained a complete capacity to receive rights and obligations still cannot undertake contractual obligation except through his guardian. So for example, he cannot himself, the child cannot do the business by himself, cannot sell, even though his own phone he cannot sell to anybody. But according to this secular type of, it's a different thing, because Islam is very much because as I told you, mutual exchange based on mutual consent. This is all very, very important. Mutual consent based on mutual exchange. This is all very, very important. For that reason, You cannot because a child may bring something from home and sell you for something for cheap. Because if you tell, I give you the Kit Kat, can you give me your mother's phone? Then maybe they know, because they like phones. Nowadays they like phones, maybe watch. Yeah, if you say, okay, I'll give you one Cadbury's, you just bring me your father's watch. Maybe they don't know the validity, I mean the value of the watch. There's a possibility they may bring the watch and give it to you, and replacing the Cadbury's that you have just for 2 ringgit or 3 ringgit. Yeah, so it is possible. So it is not allowed. The transaction is not valid, it is void. Right? He is also not privileged to pray, fast, or go to Hajj. Okay, then we talk about the second category, which I told you, ahliya al ada. Again, you have incomplete and complete. I gave you the examples already. So this is something refers to the ability of a person to manage his wealth and exercise his rights and undertake obligation in a manner recognized by the Sharia. This is the principal elements: the puberty, the intellectual standards. If someone has no puberty and then someone has a puberty, but he has no intellectual standards, someone is insane or a lunatic, or he cannot think by himself, so he will not become adult like everybody else. He will become incomplete. So now let's see the example as I give you the example for incomplete active capacity, a child between the age of 8 and the age of puberty. Yes, which we call Sabi al Mumayyiz, right? Or a child who could distinguish between good and bad. Now, if someone become 8, he knows the good thing and the bad thing, right? For example, we always teach our children, especially our daughters, which is the good touch, which is the bad touch, because they can understand. Yeah, because socially speaking, we need to teach them. They can also observe who is the right person, to whom we can contract, we can, they also know who is a stranger, right? They can understand from whom they can accept gift, to who from whom they cannot accept gift. So these are the things, because they can actually distinguish between good and bad. Okay, so according to Shafi'i and Hanbali, here is the differences between, there are two set of differences. One is Shafi'i, Hanbali. A distinguishing child doesn't have the requisite capacity, and therefore he cannot enter into any contract with or without the permission of his guardian. His guardian instead may conclude a contract. So now you can see, according to Shafi'i and Hanbali, they don't have such thing called Sabi al-Mumayyiz. Because this Sabi al-Mumayyiz, remember, according to Shafi'i and Hanbali, they don't have it, because they treat him like other children. They say if he wants to do business, he cannot by himself, he cannot do business. He also cannot do business with the permission of the guardian. His guardian must do the business on his behalf like every other child. So they are not actually considering there is a Sabi al Mumayyiz. But according to Hanafi and Maliki, they say there are a couple of things actually we can consider. His contract is of three types. Beneficial aqd is valid without guardian's permission. For example, this gift, this child, child Sabi al Mumayyiz can receive gift from anybody, because he knows the right person. That's the reason why you're all very happy when you are a child and you are celebrating your birthday. Yeah, because I know when someone is celebrating birthday, he or she always expecting the gift. And then if somebody coming up and giving the gift, you are very eager to accept it. You don't even look and ask for the permission, can I accept it or not, unless you are a 2 years, 3 years, 4 years old child. Okay, that's a different story. But when you are actually 8 years, 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, you don't wait for approval. You just receive the gift box, and then you go in your room, and then you open it and you want to see what is inside, isn't it? Maybe I'm just bringing your memory back in there few years back. You had so many memories like that. So that is the one thing. Beneficial aqd is valid to receive a gift. But number two, if there is any transaction that causes loss, to him, even with his guardian's permission, is void. Because, for example, this kind of Sabi al Mumayyiz, this kind of distinguished child, cannot offer someone gift. He can only receive, cannot offer. For example, he is actually 10-year-old, 12-year-old. Suddenly he say, okay, I offer you 100,000 ringgit from my wallet. I offer you 1,000 ringgit from my bank. No, he is not allowed to do that unless the guardian do that. All right. So if anything, there is a loss, he cannot do that. Okay. But what if there is a benefit and loss, which means business lah? Because usually business has a benefit and loss, profit, loss, sharing. We call PLS, profit loss sharing. If something like sale, hire, partnership, this thing is valid, but the person that 12 years old, he can actually do business, uh, he can actually sell or buy something, but there must be approval of the guardian. So for that reason, if you go to any Kedarunjit and you see a person like 12 years old or 9-year old is there in the counter selling something, mean you are allowed to buy and sell with him, because that person is getting approval from his father or from his mother or from the owner, right? But I'm not sure how Shafi'i and Hanbali is doing it, because according to Shafi'i, there is no such thing. So you have to be careful when you are going to kind of Qadirunshid. Make sure that you don't deal with that Sabi al Mumayyiz, because there is no such thing according to Shafi'i. But it's okay if there is any reason that person has to do the business, there is a necessary for the family, then I think it is okay to follow other mazhab as well, because alhamdulillah we have other expressions, we have some other mazhab all the time, because the different mazhabs is actually helping us whenever it is necessary, right? So I think we can also follow Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik in this case. Complete active majority capacity, I think I don't have to give you the example, because everybody, you and me, everybody is actually baligh, major. The principal elements for the complete active capacity are the puberty and intellectual standard. If I am mature enough, right, and I also have an intellectual standard, I can understand, I'm not lunatic, I'm not crazy, I'm not insane, then actually I become complete active capacity. This enables him to distinguish between useful and harmful. So now I don't have to wait for my guardian, because I don't have guardian. Once you become 17 or 18, you don't need guardian. You can actually do the business, you can actually do the transaction by yourself. But it doesn't mean that a woman can actually go and do the nikah without wali. That is the different thing, because it doesn't come under business, it is actually muashara, and this is, we are talking about muamala. So there's a difference between muamala and muashara, right? Okay. Okay, then if I have to give you some examples, like what other ulama imams are saying, the signs of puberty and prudence. If it comes to age, if the age has a determining factor, then according to Abu Hanifa, the age measure is 18 for male and 17 for female. Other scholars, it is 15 for both male and female. Every person who has reached the age of major may enter into contracts of sale and purchase, anything like rental, wakala, ijara, iara, partnership, musharaka, everything they can do. Basically, yeah, they can do that. There is no harm in that. And then this age also, not necessary it has to be the same today, because as I told you, this is the age was there in the beginning of the time. They say 18 or 17. This age also can be changed, because nowadays the things are slightly changing. There are, according to the new, according to the place, according to the culture, these things could be changed, right? For that we can actually go to the local fatwa, local ulama, ustaz. Actually, we can get the information from time to time, place to place. It could be different. All right. So I think the next one is okay. The next one is obstacles to capacity. It is actually what now the last thing that we discussed. What we discussed complete active capacity, right? So who is complete active capacity? Uh, the one who the one who is a major baligh, he becomes complete active capacity, isn't it? So now, so if you look into that, there are, if he has become the complete active capacity, he is the baligh, he is the complete person like you and me, but but he has some problems. So there are a couple of 8 or 9 obstacles, these factors. So during these consequences, actually he cannot do business on his own. For example, number one, insanity, junoon. When someone become insane, even though he is above 18, but he cannot continue the transaction, right? That is the first one. Then you have idiocy. Someone is actually not insane, but he is an idiot. For example, he is inconsistent on his decision. 1 hour ago, he said, okay, the sky is blue. Then suddenly he say, no, sky is not blue. It is, it is green. Yeah. So for example, he is inconsistent in his decision. He said sometime I want this food. Suddenly after 5 minutes he say no, I didn't say that, I want the other food. I want this dress, I want the other. So it's like inconsistent of behavior. So this kind of people is called idiocy. So if someone is idiot, and it is better that he don't do transaction because he will harm himself. Then if someone is sleeping, yeah, sometimes it happen lowest level of, because when we are sleeping we are almost dead. So it happens when you are in 7-Eleven, make sure you are there in midnight, 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. Make sure the person in counter is not sleeping. If he's like a sleepy guy, a sleepy girl, better you don't do transaction, because he might pick, or he might uh, scan the wrong barcode. Right? There's a possibility of increasing the price or decreasing the price. Make sure it's not only about you, it is also about the shop, right? So we have to be careful with that. And also unconscious, if someone is like, having some medication or something, like, tablets took it, or maybe some sort of, I don't know, there are so many ways to become unconscious nowadays. uh, so like someone is unconscious, yeah, better you don't do transaction with him, or he also should not do the transaction with. Intoxication, this is actually something that haram, of course it is haram. But if someone voluntarily intoxicated, sometimes people involuntarily intoxicated. um, what I mean by involuntary intoxicated, meaning to say that someone gave him a drink, but the person who drank, he didn't know that it is intoxicated. Someone was cheating him, giving him the wrong one. So then he become intoxicated. So that kind of consequences, we call it involuntary. The voluntary one is he himself is a Muslim, but he himself voluntarily started drinking, right? It is called voluntary intoxication. Why I gave you these two scenario? Because in one scenario, um, according to Imam Malik, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Qayyim, they said this kind of any contract that you are doing is actually it is not valid with him. If someone is intoxicated, you feel like, he feel like dizzy, and you go and you ask him to buy something, he feel like, he is, you look at him also, you will understand. Or maybe sometimes the smell, you can get the smell from him. Or maybe you see him, he is like dizzy, he's like, here and there. So better you don't do any contract with him, because it is not valid. Reason, intoxication, whether voluntary involuntary, takes away person's rational power. He won't be rational by himself. You ask him how much iPhone, he might be say his is $20, 20 ringgit iPhone, so which is actually not correct. So that is the reason. But the majority of the fiqh scholars argues that contract entered into by a person intoxicated involuntarily are not valid. But voluntarily, it is actually valid. This is something strange. The majority scholars are saying if someone voluntarily drinking, He himself voluntarily drinking, and then again he comes to the shop and he wants to sell. So if you want to buy something from him, it will be valid even though he is getting loss. It is up to him. They say if he is getting the loss, if he is getting loss, if he is losing something, it's because of his voluntarily intoxicated. Who asked him to go and have a drink? Right. So that is actually the difference between the voluntary and involuntary. If someone involuntarily doing it, then it is you better you don't do transaction with him. But if someone say, yeah, how do you know involuntarily he intoxicated or voluntarily intoxicated? Yeah, that's a difficult, tough question to ask me. Maybe you can actually understand the circumstances. For example, if someone is drinking in front of you, keeping the bottle in front of you, or he knows he has drunk, then it is voluntarily. Someone is like very look like he is actually ill, or he's about to fall, or he doesn't know what happened, then it could be involuntary. So these are the differences. I think I can give you that, but I cannot give you more because I haven't seen somebody like that for quite so long. So that is what the majority scholars are saying. If someone is in voluntarily drinking, willingly drinking and coming, it is okay to do business with him. Even though he lose it, it is up to him. Okay, then we have number 6, prodigality is called sufha, which means somebody is actually is not so good in this with his money. His hand is always open, his wallet is 24/7 open. Meaning to say he is spending a lot. He keep on spending. He doesn't keep money. That kind of person we call prodigal, sufha. So this is also something that we should not he should not actually, he himself is not allowed to sell something or buy something because of his nature. The judge, the qazi will come and stop him to do that, and the qazi will become his the qazi will become his guarantor, sorry, his guardian, because he is already a baligh, right? We are talking about someone who is adult. At the same time, he is not good with his financial decision. So a safih is a person who is wasting and spending wealth improperly. A person who could easily be deceived is considered as a safih. So maybe can I call someone like a shopaholic? Maybe the term that you some of you may know already. If someone is a shopaholic, shopaholic means like shoppy all the time, buy so many things. Oh, chante na, like people love to see, they like to buy things. Yeah, so these are the things like shopaholic. So if that kind of people, um, spending their spending nature is different, their parents always stop them to control them. It is good for them because if you cannot afford by yourself, then better you don't buy something if you cannot afford by yourself. Because when you grow up, you have to spend yourself, and you have to earn yourself, and then you have to spend yourself. So that is what the good advice if I have to give to any children. So now here the a person who could easily be deceived is considered as a safih. The opposite of safah is a rushd. Rashid means what? Someone who can manage very well. I think most of you are Rashid. I know most of you are Rashid because you can manage your wealth and property. So only a court has the power to ascertain that a certain person is a safih. And remember, the father or the grandfather cannot become the guardian over him. You know why? Because they are the reason why he becomes safih. Because they are the one who letting him spend too much money. So the father and grandfather cannot become the guardian. Instead, the court, the qazi will become the guardian. All right, any commercial transaction made by safi could not be executed unless the judge is satisfied. Yeah, Okay. Then, of course, you have two types of sufaha according to Imam Abu Hanifa. There is a adult, but or still safih. He is not allowed to interfere with his property. He would be under the supervision of guardian. Right? This is the first type who become adult and are still safih. There's another type which is who, after attaining maturity of mind, become safih. Okay, the first one is according to Imam Abu Hanifa, after Safi reaches the ages of 25 years, his property should be returned to him. Because sometimes there is a reason why, because we call it maturity of mind and maturity of body. So tell me, in which year, in which age you become maturity of mind? Any answer from your group? In what, in which year you think you get mature? I'm talking about maturity of mind, not the body. Maturity of the body, we understand. Yes?
At age
After
18?
50,
You think 18,
One.
above
21,
20.
above 20. Above 20, you think, oh, there are many numbers are coming now. Yeah. 18, 25, 19, 21, 16. Khatija cannot be 16. Okay.
18.
Um, why are the numbers always less? 21, 30. Good.
Oh.
Okay, 30. So, Ain, Nabila, Salsabila, 30. Ah, any other number you have? You know, the maturity of mind is something you become, you don't make mistakes. Sometimes, so for that reason, Imam Abu Hanifa say after Safi reaches, oh, maybe 50, maybe 40. Okay. Okay, someone said 40, so you think your lecturer is not mature? So I have to become 40 first, to become mature. Oh, 35. Okay, so you're calling me an unmature lecturer. Yeah, okay, good. All right, I just was kidding. Okay, so actually, what some say, for example, Imam Abu Hanifa say after Safi reaches 25, his property should be returned to him, because maybe before 25 he could be Safi, he could be something prodigal, they call it, but maybe after 25 he might mature, he become, he understand his mistake, because you must give him the opportunity to realize his mistake, because when a person reaches this age he would attain maturity of mind. So 25 years could be the right to say the maturity of mind. 17 or 18 could be maturity of body. According to the majority of fixed scholars, prevention may continue until such an age which a person may attain maturity of mind. Then you have the second type, those who after attaining maturity of mind become Safi. See, someone became Safi before 25, but what if someone becomes Safi after 25? Abu Hanifa say no prevention could be imposed on such person. The majority of the fiqh school and Abu Hanifa's own disciple Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad Shaybani, he may still be declared Safi even he has attained maturity of mind if it is proven that misappropriates. So these two things you need to know. One is before the maturity of mind he becomes Safi, and then the other one is he becoming Safi after 25. Yeah, so these two things are differences are there. Okay, then number 7, if someone is insolvent, bankrupt, if someone is bankrupt, he has to pay to everybody, then he cannot sell anything, he cannot start selling, he has to wait until the court declare, until the court helping him, and then they will be starting selling the movable items first before the immovable items. Yeah, you already know what is movable, what is immovable, right? The court has all the right to keep it because he is a bankrupt. A bankrupt cannot sell on his own, he has to wait until, because he has to settle to the creditors, so he cannot sell by himself. Yeah, so this is all we discuss here under insolvency, bankruptcy. And then you also have some other issues are there, like for example Imam Abu Hanifa, the debtor should not be restrained from disposing his asset even his debts are equal or more than his asset, because here there is consequences, because there is a debate saying that he is fully rational. You see, when you talk about safih is a different thing, right? When you talk about insane, is a different thing. But when you talk about the bankrupt guy is actually a good guy, a good man. He is not a stupid, right? He has done businesses and he has spent his wisdom. He spent so many things, his effort and everything. But unfortunately, the business didn't go well, right? You cannot treat him like other people. So for that reason, Imam Abu Hanifa is having the idea saying that he should not be restrained from disposing his asset, because he has a full rational capacity. He is not an idiot. He is not. If I ask you, uh, do you know how many of you know Elon Musk? I think most of you know Elon Musk. You know him, the one who has a Tesla. You know, right? He is now is sending he is sending rockets, satellites. You know, he is also he is having multiple projects and all. He is actually having a fully electric car called Tesla. So this is Elon Musk. If you know him, once he was a bankrupt. He was bankrupt because he has no money. He lost everything. But he is one of the genius. That's what they call him, genius. But I don't know his genius where it will take us to tomorrow, where it is going to take us. So he is thinking that he can go to Mars. He can live in Mars. He can open the charter vehicles to charter to the moon, right? So okay, anyway, so I'm just giving an example. Someone is fully rational capacity, doesn't suffer from any impediments that would prevent him dealing with his wealth. According to Imam Abu Hanifa, because there is a human dignity would deprive him his right. So the solution, then what is the solution? The solution is the debtor should be ordered by a court to settle his debts, filing which he could be forced or imprisoned to sell his property. Because you have to give him the chance. For example, someone bankrupt, he has some immovable property, right? So now he has to return back, he has to pay back the creditors. Now, according to Abu Hanifa, he say, give him a chance, make the court become the liability, make sure the court is actually become the wakil, and give him one chance to use his immovable property to settle the debt. If he cannot settle, then later you can take some action. This is what actually Imam Abu Hanifa is saying, right? But the majority scholars, they are not actually agree to this. In fact, Imam Abu Hanifa's two students, Imam Abu Yusuf, Imam Muhammad also is not accepting this. He's saying that what happened to the creditors? If you allow him to try, then the creditors, what they will do? So for that reason, he should not be trying, he should be settling the debt. So this is what the differences are there. You can actually go through. Then we have a mortal illness. I think with mortal illness, we will stop. The mortal illness is actually someone is actually about to die, right? Someone having cancer, someone having, mortal illness like maradul maut. He's about to die, maybe like 3 months or 1 year, right? So this kind of person usually happens when the disease gets worse from day to day until death. Mortal illness also could include the fear of death. Maybe someone is sentenced to death. So this kind of people can make certain contracts like work of charity, can make gift, right? And also some of his heirs to the non-heirs. They can do that, but there's a condition. They can only do that 1/3. They can do wasiya to 1/3. The 2/3 should go according to Sharia inheritance system, right? For example, a person who suffers from mortal sickness may give a part of his wealth as a gift to one of his heirs after his death. If the other heirs do not agree, the gift is not valid. Okay, now here I just want to give you one quick example. Maybe some of you may surprised to know this. Let's say there is a person who is about to die, like 3 months or 6 months, and there is no children is there to helping him. There is only a person, maybe housemaid is helping. Now the person who is dying, he made a wasiya to give 1/3 to his housemaid or someone who take care of him. Maybe he's not a family person, he's a non-family person. Then that person, the one who took care of him, will get the 1/3. She or he doesn't need any permission from the heirs, from the children of that person. Okay, now I give you another example. Okay, this is something surprising to you. Let's say one of the daughter is helping the father or helping everything, but other daughters, other children, other son not helping. So that father is giving her 1/3. He made a wasiya, 1/3, right? But this wasiya 1/3, that particular daughter cannot get it until the other children give approval for it. So this is something surprising. You may be thinking why it is like this for non-hair and for hair. So that's why this is what the example I gave you. Maybe inshallah I can give you, um, maybe I can explain to you if you have any questions on this. So I think with this, inshallah I will stop. Hopefully we will continue. The next one is authorization and delegation authority. We will continue next class. Before I finish the um, before I finish the recording, let me just show you the attendance. Right. So this is for section 1 and section 2. Please take note. All right. Okay. So I'm just stopping the recording and